Welcome to AI Unraveled, your daily forensic briefing at the intersection of business and artificial intelligence. It is Thursday, April 2nd, 2026. I'm your host, Etienne Newman, senior software engineer and passionate soccer dad from Canada. Today's episode is brought to you by Jamga Mind. Jamga Mind delivers technical-grade audio forensics across healthcare, energy, and finance. Look, the AI landscape moves faster than a hallucinating LLM on a double espresso, which is why I've done the heavy lifting for you. Stop scrolling through generic top 10 lists and head over to the AI Executive Toolkit at jamgamind.com/toolkit. I've handpicked and forensic vetted every tool on this list, from Chatbase and 11 Labs to Firefly AI and Google Workspace, to ensure they meet the rigorous standards of a professional and the high-stakes needs of the AI Unraveled community. Consider this your curated implementation stack to bridge the gap between raw innovation and professional-grade governance, complete with exclusive listener perks to get your firm running at light speed. Today we look at the infrastructure rebellion. Microsoft builds its own models to escape OpenAI, investors flee to Anthropic, and Jack Dorsey axes the middle manager. Let's look at the bottom line.
Today, over $600 million worth of OpenAI shares hit the secondary market, and, absolutely nobody wanted to buy them.
Yeah.
Welcome to the deep dive. Usually, if you were tracking the architecture of the modern economy, you kind of expect changes to happen at the margins, right? Like a new feature here, a slight restructuring there. But when you look at the stack of news from today, April 2nd, 2026, you don't see marginal changes. You see this ruthless, systemic architectural breakdown of the entire middle layer of the tech and corporate world. So today, we are acting as your lead systems architects to map out a theme that we can really only describe as the death of dependencies.
Yeah, that overarching pattern is completely undeniable at this point. I mean, for decades, companies built their infrastructure like skyscrapers. They relied on all these load-bearing wall intermediaries, middle managers, external software vendors, traditional capital markets.
Right.
And what we are seeing today is just the wholesale vaporization of those load-bearing walls. Organizations are moving toward a strictly direct, automated endpoint model, bypassing everything in between.
And our mission for you, the listener, is to really pull apart the mechanics of exactly how this is happening. Because we have a wild stack of sources today. We are breaking down Jack Dorsey's new mandate to replace middle management with a centralized AI world model. We've got Microsoft taking a sudden aggressive turn toward total model independence, just leaving their partners in the dust.
Which is huge.
Yeah. It really is. We're also tracking that massive capital flight in the secondary markets I just mentioned, alongside an insane $1.75 trillion SpaceX IPO that basically breaks every rule of traditional venture capital. And finally, Cloudflare is launching an infrastructure platform aimed directly at the heart of the legacy web.
So, okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand this architectural shift, we have to start with the oldest dependency in business, the human manager.
Right. So Jack Dorsey's recent restructuring at Block is essentially a surgical strike on the concept of human management. He initiated a 40% workforce cut back in February that is over 4,000 employees just out the door.
Yeah, but the narrative he is pushing isn't about, a financial rescue or extending the runway. He is framing this as a deliberate pivot to what he calls world model management.
The thesis he lays out there is just fascinating. He argues that a human manager is essentially just a biological router, like a human API.
That's exactly it.
Because historically, a middle manager takes strategic directives from the executive layer, translates those down to the engineers, gathers the progress reports, translates those back up, and routes resources accordingly. But Dorsey is asking, why would a company maintain a slow human API when an AI can just hold a live world model of the entire business right in its context window?
And the mechanics of Block make this entirely possible, because they are a remote-first company. That distinction is crucial. It means every single operational action, every design document, every Slack message, every code commit, every resource allocation already exists as a digital record.
The data exhaust is just ubiquitous.
Exactly. It's ubiquitous and highly structured. So Dorsey's bet is that AI architecture has finally caught up enough to ingest that specific data exhaust and just assume the routing function entirely. Under this framework, he claims the company only needs 3 types of employees: builders, problem owners who are accountable for outcomes, and player coaches focus on talent development.
So the purely administrative layer is just obsolete to him.
Completely obsolete.
I have to push back on this architecture, though. When I look at a remote-first company running on an AI world model, the governance risks seem, well, catastrophic. Sure, the AI has all the data, but can an algorithm actually replicate the nuanced contextual routing of a seasoned manager? My primary concern here is hallucination.
Right.
You don't have human middleman to catch an error and say, wait, hold on, this routing directive fundamentally conflicts with our Q3 goals.
Yeah.
You just have a model hallucinating a massive shift in product priority and cascading that error down to 100 engineers instantly.
That is the exact vulnerability critics point to, but it assumes the AI is operating as an open-ended generative chatbot, and it isn't. The industry is solving the hallucination gap by moving away from general data scraping and moving entirely toward bespoke workflow replacement.
Which is a very different thing.
Very different. The AI isn't being asked to invent a strategy. It is being bounded by rigid, highly specific standard operating procedures. This is exactly where the Business Insider report on OpenAI's Project Stagecraft fits perfectly into the puzzle.
Project Stagecraft. I mean, the numbers on this are staggering.
They really are. OpenAI is quietly paying roughly 4,000 freelancers through a platform called Handshake AI, offering at least $50 an hour. But they aren't paying these people to, label images or rate chatbot responses.
Right, the usual gig work.
Exactly. They are recruiting highly specialized knowledge workers. We're talking pharmacists, commercial aviation specialists, plant scientists, HR professionals, and they are paying them to meticulously document their daily operations.
Which means AGI development has fundamentally shifted its target. They aren't trying to teach the AI the theoretical knowledge of a pharmacist. They are executing what we call workflow mapping. They are teaching the model exactly what a pharmacist does at 9:15 a.m., 10:30 a.m., and 2:00 p.m.
Right. They are cataloging the exact context a worker receives, the specific proprietary databases they query, the tools they use, and the exact deliverables they push to the next person in the chain. They are mapping professional tasks down to the keystroke.
Wow.
It turns human judgment into a deterministic state machine. By bounding the AI's logic to these heavily documented step-by-step corporate SOPs, you drastically reduce the space for hallucination. You aren't asking the AI to think. You are asking it to execute a predetermined workflow.
One contractor even told Business Insider, quote, "We all were aware that we were basically training AI to replace us." So if you were listening to this on your commute right now, you really have to wonder, is your company quietly cataloging your Slack messages and Jira tickets to map your workflow? Because you are functionally being paid to dig your own professional grave.
It's clinical. The AI is learning to execute the workflow of the middleman.
But this architectural breakdown doesn't stop with humans. Because when tech giants realize they can map and automate internal workflows, they also realize they can map and automate the external technologies they rely on. They are aggressively cutting out their reliance on each other.
The transition from general reliance to model independence, and Microsoft is the prime example today.
Because Microsoft's relationship with OpenAI up to this point has been viewed as deeply symbiotic. Microsoft provided the compute, OpenAI provided the breakthrough intelligence. But I've actually always seen it differently. To me, OpenAI wasn't a partner. They were a booster rocket.
A booster rocket.
Yeah, think about it. Microsoft strapped this massive, highly expensive OpenAI booster to their corporate hull just to achieve escape velocity in the AI space race. And now that they are in orbit, they're looking at this dependency, realizing the burn rate, and preparing to detach the booster.
I'd actually push back slightly on the booster analogy. A booster rocket is designed from the beginning to fall away, right? Microsoft never intended for OpenAI to fall away. They intended to own them.
Ah, okay, fair point.
But when the current regulatory environment made an outright acquisition impossible, Microsoft had to pivot to internal extraction. They had to learn how to build what OpenAI builds, and they just proved they can do it. Today, they launched 3 in-house models, MAI Transcribe 1, MAI Voice 1, and MAI Image 2.
And they are going directly after the core offerings of not just OpenAI, but Google and 11 Labs.
The mechanics of how they built these models are what should worry every AI lab on the planet. Mustafa Suleyman, who is leading this internal charge at Microsoft, is doing this with incredibly small, highly concentrated engineering teams. We are talking about sub-10-person teams building frontier-level audio and image models.
Wait, sub-10-person teams?
Yeah.
Competing against specialized labs boasting hundreds of top-tier researchers. How is that structurally possible?
Through knowledge distillation and synthetic data. They use massive foundational models, likely the very models they licensed from OpenAI, by the way, to generate highly structured, synthetic training data. They then feed that perfect data into smaller, specialized architectures.
Oh, wow.
And the compute efficiency is remarkable. Suleiman pointed out that MAI Transcribe 1 runs on half the GPUs of its competitors, yet it beats OpenAI's Whisper model across all 25 benchmarked languages.
They are achieving better latency and accuracy using half the hardware with a fraction of the headcount. That's a ruthless structural advantage. And it explains the recent renegotiation of their alliance. Microsoft quietly inserted a clause that allows them to pursue superintelligence completely on their own.
Right, they mapped the workflow of how to build and deploy these models, internalized the process, and achieved model independence.
And when a company like Microsoft proves that a 10-person team can use synthetic data to bypass a massive multi-billion-dollar AI lab, the financial markets wake up to a harsh reality.
The moat around companies like OpenAI isn't their exclusive talent pool, it is just raw compute. And that realization triggered an absolute bloodbath in the secondary markets today.
Which brings us back to that $600 million in unsold OpenAI shares I mentioned at the top. The secondary market dynamics are shifting violently. This is secondary capital flight.
You have investors looking at these shifting dependencies. They see Microsoft distancing itself. They see smaller models beating giant ones on specific tasks. And they're moving their money to where the enterprise integration is actually happening.
While those OpenAI shares found zero buyers, secondary platforms are tracking over $2 billion in cash, just sitting on the sidelines, waiting specifically to deploy into Anthropic. Let's look at the math here. OpenAI is currently defending an $852 billion valuation. Anthropic is sitting at a $380 billion valuation.
The market is essentially telegraphing that a near trillion-dollar valuation is fundamentally unsupportable when your primary distribution partner, Microsoft, is actively building internal replacements for your product. Anthropic, meanwhile, is showing significantly stronger growth directly with enterprise clients, bypassing the consumer hype cycle.
So the risk-reward calculus has just completely flipped.
It has. But navigating that shift requires deep, verified intelligence. For decision makers allocating capital in this chaotic secondary market, JamGuiMind provides human-verified, technical-grade audio forensics across finance and tech. Visit thejamguimind.com.
It is a brutal environment for capital allocation right now. But if we want to examine the ultimate circumvention of financial dependency, we have to look past secondary markets entirely. We have to look at the SEC filing that just dropped for SpaceX.
You mean the targeted $1.75 trillion mega IPO slated for June?
Yes. Let me put on my systems architect hat for a second, because the underlying structure of this IPO is completely unprecedented. Just before filing, Elon Musk absorbed xAI, his artificial intelligence company, directly into SpaceX. Why? xAI reportedly generates less than $1 billion in revenue.
While the SpaceX launch and satellite business generates roughly $20 billion.
Exactly. Space exploration does not natively help you build a large language model. So is this IPO actually about colonizing Mars? Or is Musk using a highly profitable space monopoly to quietly and aggressively fund the massive compute needs of his AI lab?
It is the latter, absolutely. And it is a brilliant circumvention of the traditional venture capital machine. To build artificial general intelligence, you need a seemingly infinite amount of capital to secure two things: compute and energy. OpenAI is relying on Microsoft's infrastructure. Anthropic is relying on Amazon and Google.
Which are increasingly fragile dependencies.
Right. Musk has engineered a structure where he doesn't need external tech giants or VC firms. He is targeting a raise of between $50 billion and $75 billion in this IPO.
That would more than double the largest IPO in human history, which was Saudi Aramco's $29 billion raise back in 2019. It's insane.
It is. And look at the compute energy data nexus he has assembled. Starlink's massive distributed satellite network provides a global proprietary data pipeline that literally no other AI lab can access. Meanwhile, SpaceX's industrial-scale manufacturing and energy infrastructure provides the sheer power required for xAI's supercomputer clusters.
So by folding them together, he turns rockets, global internet, and robotics into a self-sustaining capital and compute loop. He is bypassing the VCs, he is bypassing the cloud providers, he is maintaining absolute control through a special two-tier voting structure, even while opening up 30% of the allocation to retail investors. It is the ultimate independent tech stack.
Speaking of tech stacks, we really should mention the tools actually driving this execution.
Oh, absolutely. The AI landscape is moving too fast for generic top 10 lists. Etienne has done the heavy lifting for the AI Unraveled community. Head over to djamgamemind.com/toolkit for the AI Executive Toolkit. It's a hand-picked, forensic-vetted implementation stack featuring tools like Chatbase, 11 Labs, and ARI, complete with exclusive listener perks to get your firm running at light speed.
Having the right implementation stack is critical right now, primarily because the very definition of software infrastructure is being rewritten as we speak. We've dissected the death of the human middleman, the end of model dependencies, and the circumvention of venture capital. Now we have to analyze the final load-bearing wall being demolished today.
Legacy software infrastructure and the developers who manually maintain it.
Exactly. The Cloudflare launch. They just released M-, explicitly calling it the AI-native successor to WordPress.
But looking at the specs, it is a targeted WordPress killer designed to eliminate the most frustrating dependencies of the legacy web.
The underlying mechanics of M- are a masterclass in modern architecture. The entire system operates on a strict scale-to-zero principle.
Let's elevate that concept for the listeners. Tracking cloud architecture. Traditional serverless computing still suffered from cold start latency. You were still relying on a container spinning up in the background when traffic hit. So how does M- bypass that?
M-'s scale-to-zero utilizes edge v8 isolates. That means the infrastructure functionally does not exist until the exact HTTP request hits the node. There is no background compute, no container dependency, and no idle server maintenance.
You are built exclusively for the CPU time during that literal fraction of a millisecond.
Yes. But the more profound architectural shift is how Cloudflare handles security dependencies. They pointed out that 96% of all WordPress vulnerabilities originate from third-party plugins.
Which goes back to the skyscraper analogy. A user installs a third-party calendar plugin. That plugin acts as an unmonitored load-bearing wall with unrestricted access to the core database. The plugin gets compromised, and the whole system just collapses.
M- neutralizes that threat by running every single plugin in a severely restricted sandbox, utilizing their dynamic workers architecture. A plugin must declare its specific permissions upfront. It is physically isolated from the rest of the environment.
So this enforces security at the architectural level.
Precisely. It completely removes the dependency on the human user to constantly monitor, patch, and update legacy code just to keep the lights on.
But if the infrastructure is sandboxing itself, scaling itself to zero at the edge, and managing its own security parameters, the daily function of a human coder fundamentally changes, and the data backs this up. The new survey from CodeSignal polled 450 software engineers in the U.S.
And they found that 91% of them are now heavily utilizing agentic AI tools like Claude Code, Codex, or Cursor.
Over 3/4 of those engineers have pushed AI-generated code directly into production environments within the last 6 months. The paradigm shift here is that modern developers are no longer the actors in the scene. They have become movie directors. They aren't sitting there hammering out every single line of Python syntax by hand. They are sitting in the director's chair, giving notes, and coordinating a team of AI agents to write the code for them, iterating until the performance matches the vision.
The industry is actually adopting the term vibe coding for this process, which refers to custom software generated rapidly through iterative AI prompting. But what this really means is that manual syntax generation has officially become a dead dependency. The CEO of CodeSignal highlighted a fascinating metric. Job postings for developers are actually up year over year.
Wait, really? Even with all the agents?
Yes, because companies are no longer hiring coders. They are hiring AI orchestrators.
Which means the hardest part of software engineering is no longer syntax. It's semantics. The bottleneck isn't writing the code. The bottleneck is the ambiguity of human language. If you cannot articulate the exact business logic and specific parameters of what you want, the AI orchestrator fails.
Exactly. The human language bottleneck is the only one left. This is why 42% of the surveyed engineers stated they would actively refuse to hire or collaborate with a developer who doesn't utilize AI agents.
Wow.
If you are still trying to write and debug everything manually, you are a localized bottleneck slowing down the entire deployment pipeline. You must evolve into an orchestrator, or the architecture will just route around you.
And that brings the entirety of today's deep dive into sharp focus. When we look at the board today, the architectural teardown is absolute. Jack Dorsey's world model management is actively replacing the human routing layer. OpenAI's Project Stagecraft is aggressively mapping complex professional workflows into rigid SOPs to replace specialized knowledge workers.
Microsoft is using synthetic data to achieve model independence, proving that massive AI labs are just temporary compute dependencies.
We see capital fleeing bloated primary valuations. searching for enterprise reality with Anthropic, while Elon Musk builds a self-sustaining compute energy loop inside SpaceX to bypass traditional finance entirely. And finally, Cloudflare is sandboxing the legacy web, while software engineers evolve from syntax writers to semantic directors.
The intermediaries, the middlemen, and the legacy load-bearing walls have been systematically removed. We are rapidly approaching a state of pure, frictionless, automated execution.
So for you, the listener, the application of all this is immediate and deeply personal. You need to look closely at your own professional architecture right now. Audit your daily tasks. Where do you sit in your organization's data flow?
Are you the vital endpoint setting the core strategy? Are you the end user receiving the final value? Or are you a load-bearing wall?
Right. Are you just routing information, summarizing data, and acting as a human API, waiting to be optimized out by an AI orchestrator?
This raises an important question, though. As we relentlessly optimize every layer of management, capital allocation, and infrastructure down to zero dependencies, as we increasingly rely on isolated, scale-to-zero AI models to route our corporate decisions, direct our investments, and write our production code, it leaves us with one critical vulnerability. Who actually audits the system when this closed-loop ecosystem inevitably begins feeding on its own output?
Subscribe to AI Unraveled on Apple Podcasts to listen completely ads-free.
That concludes our forensic business rundown for April 2nd. The strategic signal for today is disintermediation. The companies winning in Q2 2026 are the ones cutting out the middlemen. Block is proving that you don't need human managers if you have a digital record and an LLM. Microsoft is proving you don't need an exclusive partnership with OpenAI if you have 10 good engineers and a massive GPU cluster. And Cloudflare is proving you don't need vulnerable WordPress plugins if you have AI-native sandboxing. The entire tech stack, from capital markets to human resources, is being flattened by intelligence. This episode was made possible by Jamga Mind. For human-verified, technical-grade forensics, visit jamgamind.com. And don't forget to grab your professional implementation stack at jamgamind.com/toolkit. If you are ready to stay ahead without the noise, hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts to enjoy this briefing completely ads-free. I'm Etienne Newman. Stay sharp and keep unraveling the future. And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.